On today's watchmaking topic, we're going to cover screwdrivers. Screwdrivers are one of the watchmaker's most important tools, and it's very important that they be kept in good condition and that you properly select them when working on a watch. This will help you to avoid damage to the watch and get the work done in a more efficient manner. We're going to talk about the condition of your screwdriver blades first. The typical watchmaker screwdriver has two flat sides and looks like this when viewed from the side and that when viewed from the front. When looked from the end, the screwdriver should be a rectangle. This rectangle, when you look at the tip, indicates that the two faces, this one and the one behind it, are parallel to each other and will properly fit into the slot. You want that to be the same shape as the slot. If the tip of your blade is shaped like this, it will never provide a good surface to the screw. Let me show you an example of a couple of tips of screwdrivers. The screwdriver pictured here has a good tip. You'll see that the two edges are parallel to each other, and this one fit in the slot will provide a nice, good, secure attachment to the screw. In contrast, the screwdriver blade shown here has one side which is flat and the other side which curves up like that. And when inserted into a slot in a screw, is going to wobble back and forth on that side. If the condition of your screwdrivers is not good, you should take the time to use an India stone and reshape the tips of your screwdriver. The typical way of doing that is first to work on the flat sides of your screwdriver, here and here, until you have them flat and parallel, and then to reduce the tip until your screwdriver blade is the thickness that you want. You have to be sure and do these operations to produce a good quality tip. When your screwdrivers are in good condition, it's important to select the correct screwdriver for the job. There are two things which affect the screwdriver. One is the diameter of the blade, typically represented by different colors, and then the thickness of the tip. You want to be sure that the diameter of the blade is not wider than the head of the screw. If it protrudes out beyond the screw, it will damage the plate. The screwdriver blade pictured here is the correct fit for the screw. You'll see that there is only a very narrow gap between the edge of the screw and the screwdriver blade here, and on this side as well. It does not extend beyond the screw on either side, and it is not so narrow that it is likely to break off. By contrast, the screwdriver pictured in this image extends beyond the edge of the screw head. And when this screw is screwed down into the bridge, the tip of that blade will contact the bridge and scratch it, damaging the movement and introducing small metal particles into the watch movement. The other area of concern is how deep the screwdriver penetrates into the slot, or the size of the tip. Looking at the screw now from the side, you want your screwdriver blade to contact both corners of the slot, here and here, and penetrate almost all the way down but not contact the bottom of the slot. This provides a good grip. A screwdriver blade which is too narrow such as the one illustrated here, will hit the bottom before it hits the corners. In this watch, it is likely to slide back and forth. It could easily slip out of the screw head and scratch components of the watch. And when viewed straight on, the pressure is not going to be distributed evenly along the whole slot, but mostly at this corner and this corner, which will end up with a screw whose slot ultimately looks something like that, with raised corners and burrs on the slot here and here. This is unsightly and causes problems later on. The screwdriver blade shown here penetrates into the slot, does not contact the bottom, and has full contact along both edges of the slot here. A screwdriver blade which is damaged or which is too narrow for the slot can result in damage like what you see here, a jagged edge with raised burrs appearing on the screw. Using a screwdriver blade which is too wide for the head of the screw can result in damage like is seen here, and in the close-up view here, a raised or a scratched shiny brass portion here where the plating has been scratched off with a raised burr at the end. In a subsequent service, when that screw is removed, that burr could be knocked off and make its way into the movement. This kind of damage is not acceptable in a watch. If you were to accidentally impart this kind of damage, the bridge should be replaced. One thing to pay careful attention to are screws which have a beveled or chamfered underside. Oftentimes the slots in these screws penetrate into the bevel. Here the dotted line represents the bottom of the slot. And if you were to take a screwdriver that was the width of the top of the head and insert it in there, it would actually penetrate out. And as you screwed this down into the bridge, it would scratch the chamfer in the bridge. One way to resolve this is to choose a screwdriver which is only as wide as the bottom of the slot. Or another method is to take your nicely formed screwdriver and then to remove the corners so that when you introduce it into the slot, that it doesn't protrude out here and will not damage the bridge. This allows you to get full contact across the top of the screw head and distribute the weight more evenly while still preventing the damage from it sticking out down here. Here we have a short video showing the screwdriver with the corners ground off. I'll slide it out right here so you can see the shape of the screwdriver with the corners cut off. And you can see that as we move this down into the bridge, it's not protruding through at all, and it safely puts the screw in without any damage being caused. Some watchmakers like to use hollow ground screwdrivers. These are screwdrivers that are formed with a sharpening tool which has two round stones. That as the screwdriver is introduced in and moved across the stones, produces a screwdriver which has two parallel sides, as opposed to two slanted sides. The advantages to this type of screwdriver are, when properly fit in a slot, the force is distributed not just at the upper edge of the slot, but along the whole area of the slot, and it's less likely to cause damage. Some of the problems with this kind of screwdriver are, if you have one that is too narrow for the slot, it's going to continue to put the pressure only on the outside corners, which is a problem. And if you want to reshape this screwdriver to make it wider, you cannot do so as easily as you can with a flat screwdriver. With a flat screwdriver, if you want to make it wider, you simply have to remove a little bit of material here, and it will penetrate not as far into the slot before the top area contacts the screw head. With a hollow ground screwdriver, you have to actually take back and reform the screwdriver in order to accomplish this. This is why many watchmakers who use hollow ground screwdrivers maintain 2 or 3 different sets of screwdrivers in different thickness tips so that they don't have to be reshaping the tips of their screwdrivers. One last topic I want to touch on briefly here before we wrap up is, now that you have nicely prepared screwdrivers, they appropriately fit in the slot, how do you know how tight to make the screws in the watch? Today there are wonderful products on the market, torque screwdrivers that you can set for specific torque tightness, and they will then slip after they reach that tightness. If you have access to the manufacturer's information and know precisely which torque you need for the screws, these are wonderful. They're great in assembly, but for the watchmaker out in the field, this doesn't make very much sense. Some watchmakers have developed their own strategies for developing screws and getting them the proper tightness, and others just continue to tighten the screws guessing at what the correct tightness might be. One thing I was taught in school, this is not the only method, but one method that seems to work quite well, is when you install a screw in the watch, you're going to take that screw and you're going to put the screwdriver in it, and you're going to take that screw and you're going to turn it until it first makes the bottom side of the screw makes contact with the bottom of the recess for the screw. So you're going to turn it and it's going to kind of just stop gently. You don't want to turn it hard. Just turn it until it first makes contact with the metal there. At that point, you then want to continue to turn the screw essentially the width of the slot. So if this is the point where it stopped, you then want to turn it until it's aligned like that, and that is tight enough. When you loosen the screw, you should feel a little pop, almost be able to hear it as it comes free. You don't want to go any tighter than this because you're likely to break the screw head. The good thing about this method is, traditionally, the larger the screw head, the wider the slot. The smaller the screw, the narrower the slot. And so this tends to be appropriate in most instances for the screw. You'll develop a feel with time, but as a basic rule, screw it until it stops, and then again the width of a slot for a nice tight screw that won't break off the head. The next watchmaker will be able to get out, but also will not loosen itself on its own within the watch. I'm going to demonstrate a couple videos of me inserting some screws into watches here, and you can see that in actual watch how tight that actually is. You see we're going to put this screw down in, and then as it first begins to touch right there, you pause, and then you go, there it is, you put just a little bit more on it. It comes, you see that first little pop, and then it comes loose. Here it is from another angle. Screw it down until it comes to a stop, and put a little more on it, there it is. And then you get that first little pop as it comes free. And looking straight down on it. Screw it in until it stops. And then you put a little extra on it. And it pops free when it comes undone. Understanding how to properly select screwdrivers and properly maintain your screwdrivers is an essential part of the watchmaker's knowledge base. I encourage you to always take a loop and examine the tips of your screwdrivers before using them on any screw to make sure that they are in good condition. And use a loop, magnifying eyepiece, as you screw in the screws to make sure that they are properly in contact with the correct surfaces of the screw to reduce the likelihood that you will damage them. Thank you for joining us today.